the Coney Garth, and I'm in Jefferson, Wisconsin, which is between Madison and Milwaukee. And the Coney Garth is so named because Coney is an Old English word for rabbit, and Garth is the Old English word for yard. And this is an old husbandry technique to put your rabbits out in a walled yard, and then when you wanted one, you would go out there and harvest it. And I thought, well, I'm not doing that much different. It's just that I'm moving the yard around. So, my name is Julie Engel, and I have the Coney Garth, and I'm in Jefferson, Wisconsin, which is between Madison and Milwaukee. And the Coney Garth is so named because Coney is an Old English word for rabbit, and Garth is the Old English word for yard. And this is an old husbandry technique to put your rabbits out in a walled yard, and then when you wanted one, you would go out there and harvest it. And I thought, well, I'm not doing that much different. It's just that I'm moving the yard around, and I like the way it sounds. So I have become the Coney Garth. How many of you have heard of this system or what I'm doing? Cool. So I have a circuitous route. I started farming in 2005 at the Stone Barn Center for Food and Agriculture in upstate New York. We had a host of different types of animals and livestock. We had a diversified grazing operation. We had turkeys, broilers, a grazing flock of sheep, laying hens, Berkshire pigs, honeybees, and this is where I started the rabbits. I went down to Polyface Farm in Virginia, and I bought my breeding stock from Daniel Salatin, Joel's son. And I copied his system exactly. How many of you have tried hairpins? 1, 2, 3. So I did the hairpins for 2 years, and I found it very dissatisfying for a number of reasons. So I'm just going to pause for a moment and invite all you guys who are coming in to come forward. We do have seats in the front. So, welcome, welcome. Yeah, or, you know. So, I did not like the hairpins because it's a lot of labor. So, you have your full-grown does. They're still in a cage. You have their litters with them for the first 8 weeks. That's this bottom picture here. Can you see this laser pointer? Okay. So, the kids are with the mothers for about the first 8 weeks. I would go out and I would cut forage and I would carry it to the cage. So there's a little bit of labor. After 8 weeks old, the fryers would then go out to the hairpen, and that's this middle picture here. And I didn't like the hairpen for a number of reasons. The first is you're hauling the hairpen, which is heavy. It can only hold about 8 to 10 fryers. So if you have any type of scale, you're moving a lot of pens. Also, you're still hauling water, you're still hauling alfalfa pellets, and the slats on the bottom of the hairpen here were not effective at actually keeping the rabbits in. So I was chasing rabbits. And in addition, when I was pulling the hairpen forward, it would oftentimes catch the legs of the rabbits and sometimes break them. So I had a little bit of loss there. And I thought, well, there's got to be a better way to do this, right? Just quit rabbits. But the better way, I moved up to Northland Sheep Dairy, which is outside of Ithaca, New York. They have 100% grass-fed cheese. They have beautiful pastures. I learned to milk their sheep. I learned to make hay with their horses and mules. It was a wonderful experience, and I learned to take advantage of their beautiful, beautiful pastures that were really well managed. As you can see here, I took all of my does out of cages. I put them all together in a colony, and then I put them out on grass, and I said, well, I hope you guys lose, because I'm not going to feed you anymore. And they did. I did go cold turkey. I don't know if I would recommend that again, but I just put them all out on there, and it worked out. And I've been playing around with it ever since. This was in the spring of 2008. I see a question. No, unfortunately. immediate biofeedback about your system and the quantity and the quality of milk that you get twice a day. And so I had a good place to practice what I thought should happen with rabbits. Suffice it to say that I have moved a lot. I have moved from New York to Wisconsin. I moved 6 times in 8 years with the rabbits. All that is to say is that the rabbits are very flexible and resilient. And I have been on all types of pasture, really beautiful pasture at Northern Sheep Dairy. I'm on really crappy pasture right now. You will see photographs from every place that I've been. So keep that in mind. The really crappy pasture didn't suddenly morph into this beautiful pasture, or vice versa. So I'll try to keep that clear, but if you have questions about, wait, this looks really different, why is that, please let me know. I landed in the most perfect spot. I live now in Jefferson, Wisconsin, and I am part of a cooperative farm. So I am part owner, and there are 5 other people that own this farm with me. 2 of whom live with me on the farm and are farmers. They are Ann and Dennis, and they have Regenerative Roots Vegetable Farm, CSA. And then 3 others that live in the city of Milwaukee. So we have an urban and a rural contingent. We come together and we steward the land together. I have to say, after renting land for 10 years from a host of different landowners, this, in my opinion, is the absolute perfect mix. I have the liberty of owning my own land. I have the ability to do what I want. It's never trumped by the landowner because I have say in what's going on. And yet I don't have to have a full mortgage. I live between Madison and Milwaukee. I have 2 population centers that want rabbit. Land prices are really high. And so I now have access to this land. We're looking for farmers. So please, if you are interested and have an operation that you would like to have on land and you want more information, I'm going to pass around these flyers. Please take one if you're interested. It's called Wild Abundance Community Farm, and it is the best. This is our land. It's 30 acres, like I said, in Jefferson. The house is in the center there. The rabbits, you'll see a lot of pictures. For the past 2 summers have been in this 6-acre field. You can tell from this photograph, it's a pretty crappy field. Not a lot going on. This is a 14-acre hayfield. These 2 blue squares, this is now where Ann and Dennis currently have their vegetables. And this fall, I took this parcel, the southern parcel, about 7 acres, and my neighbor put some manure on it, plowed it up, and planted it to a pasture mix that I chose specifically for the rabbits. This is where Ann and Dennis used to have their vegetable farm. This is an orchard. We have a whole bunch of mixed berries, aronia, elderberry, etc. No trees, but alternate berries. So if you're interested in managing an orchard, we have one for you. This pasture up here, this 6 acres, you'll see the photographs. It was probably sufficient nutrition for the rabbits. In fact, I know it was. But it's all ragweed and thistle and ryegrass and other awful things. And I decided, when I moved to this property, I wanted to see what the rabbits could do to that pasture. Could I renovate this pasture simply by grazing? Over the past 2 years, I have decided that is no longer my priority. Ease of labor has become my priority, which is why I have moved, and well, I should say, I hope to move to that 7-acre southern parcel in early mid-July. And I'm hoping to have a pasture walk in August, so people can come to the farm, see the new pasture, see the old pasture, and see what the rabbits have done to it. If you are interested in a pasture walk or any other information, I'm sending around a sign-up sheet. Feel free to sign in. Thank you so much. Oh boy. Things are going wacko. Okay. So I realize in retrospect that I have been applying these 4 basic principles of managed grazing to rabbits. I did not set out to do this. This was not my intention. This is me looking back at what I've been doing for the last 10 years and saying, oh, that's what I've been doing. So there's a lot of terms that get thrown out there about grazing. These laws are applicable to a number of different labels: management intensive grazing, or MIG, rotational grazing, rational grazing. These laws are not applicable to ultra high density grazing or mob grazing. So keep those two things in mind. Excuse me. So these laws were written by Andre Buisson in 1949, I believe. He wrote his book, Grass Productivity. They've been around a long time. First law has to do with regrowth. So you have your soil level, you have your grass above, you have your root mass below. When you cut the grass, an equal amount of root matter is sloughed off, so it's a mirror. You have to respect that. You have to allow the grass to have enough energy in its roots that after it is cut off, it can use that energy to grow, to rebound, or in the case of early in the spring, to come up. If you don't respect that, it's going to take a lot longer for it to yield. The second part of this rule is that the grass has kind of a plateau growth rate. So it comes up, it's growing, and it kind of plateaus, lignifies, goes to seed. Ideally, you want to put your animals where they get the most nutrition from the grass and the most quantity. So you're trying to get the top of the plateau before it actually plateaus. So that's what the first two rules are addressing. Also, it says climate and environment and weather will all impact how quickly this happens. And that's where the skill and the art of you as a pasture manager will really come into play. Looking around, seeing what's happening with your grass. Sorry about this. So the second law has to do with the number of times that the paddock is grazed. So you put your animals into a paddock, they go around, they eat everything they want, and then you don't move them. And they're kind of like, well, I'm hungry. What am I going to do now? I guess I'll go back over here and I'll eat this again. So that's saying that that is not a good thing. Don't do that. So the third law is to all the animals with the greatest nutritional requirements need to go first. So any animal that is lactating, that's why the dairy is the gold standard with the grazing. Any animal that's lactating has to go first. They need the best nutrition. That's why when we were at the sheep dairy, all of our dairy ewes went first. They got a new paddock after every milking. That's a lot of moving, but we were requiring a lot of output from those animals. The fourth law is basically saying you can't keep an animal, no matter how much grass you give them, you can't keep an animal in the same paddock for 3 days and expect them to produce. You got to move them. This is what it looks like when you apply those principles to rabbits. Don't you all want to do this? That looks like a jungle. This is that 6-acre pasture. That's the ragweed, the giant ragweed. It's 10 foot tall. Rabbits will eat it if you knock it down for them. They do an excellent job. This is another picture of what it looks like when you apply those principles to rabbits. So here you can see this line. This area was grazed early in the season and is recovering. This area was allowed to grow, and the rabbits came down, made a U-turn, and now are continuing this way. This paddock here is about the size that I do for a 24-hour period. It's 48 feet by 48 feet. It used to look like this. After 24 hours, it looks like this. So the rabbits do have an amazing ability. Yes, question? So how many rabbits do I have in this area? That, I don't know. In that picture, I probably had about 160 rabbits. Keep in mind, this is really crappy forage. If you have good forage, you can condense. So the quantity and the quality of forage will determine your stocking density. As with all animals, it's the same with rabbits. So this is a big footprint, but it had to be because I didn't have that much forage much out there for them. Ideally, I think it should be a little bit smaller. There's another picture of what it looks like when you apply it to rabbits. In this picture, what I want to point out is that here's where they were the day before. I just moved them into this paddock here. You can see this is the back line. And then here's this fence here. Here's this fence here. This fence is now continued in the new parcel. This paddock here has all of my sexually mature females, which are called does, and then all of my babies ages 0 to 10 weeks, all females ages 10 weeks to 22 weeks. This paddock here, immediately adjacent, they share a fence, they can touch noses through the fence, are all of my male rabbits. Sexually mature male rabbits are called bucks, and then all of my boy rabbits ages 10 weeks to 22 weeks. I generally slaughter between 16 and 22 weeks depending on growth rate. Any questions so far? Yeah. I control the breeding, theoretically. I try to control it. Do I control breeding? That was the question, yeah. I will show you. The question was about what kind of fencing do you use, and I will show you. This is the final picture showing you what it looks like to have those rabbits on pasture, applying those principles to rabbits. This is a different pasture, much better pasture, higher quality, has some chicory in there. So that's what it looks like. There's a number of things that I discovered along the way. Rabbits are kind of quirky. This is red urine. So when rabbits are eating forage of this type, their urine is red. And it's a little bit alarming sometimes because you think, oh boy, what's going on out here? But it's totally normal for a rabbit. So don't worry about it. Blood looks different. You'll learn to tell the difference. But nobody told me when I started bumbling along this path that rabbits are not cattle. What? So all of those principles were developed for dairy cattle. This is how a cow eats. She wraps her tongue around that grass and yanks it into her mouth. She does not have top teeth. That is very different than the wee little rabbit that has both top and bottom teeth. And those teeth grow continuously. They need to gnaw on things in order to keep their teeth healthy. And their mouth is very small. It's, maybe a quarter of an inch. A cow's mouth, I don't know, 4 inches wide. That rabbit can precisely choose what blade of grass it wants to eat. It can eat every single piece of clover all around and totally ignore that orchard grass. The impact on the landscape is really different. Also, the rabbit is a pseudo-ruminant. It is not a ruminant. It does have the cecum here, which I like to say is akin to our appendix, meaning it doesn't go anywhere. It's just a pouch in their digestive system where there's a symbiotic relationship that takes place. I like to call it a vitamin B factory, which is pretty rare that animals are able to create their own vitamin B. And the way they get that vitamin B is they ingest their fecal matter directly from the anus. So they produce 2 types of fecal matter, night feces or soft feces and hard feces that they expel. That night feces or soft feces, when they ingest it, that act is called coprophage. So it's totally normal for rabbits to do that. And in fact, they benefit from it. They get their vitamin B, and that breaks down the lignin, and they have a second round to get more nutrition from the matter that they've eaten. Rabbits are a social animal. They are not a flock animal. You would never see them all lined up in the same direction. They would never herd. They don't like to be this close to one another. They like to interact, but on their own terms. They have a high resistance to electric shock. So you can't use electric fences with them. I tried for 4 years. I wanted it to work so much. It makes my life so much easier. And it just didn't work because rabbits are very light. My biggest does are between 9 and 10 pounds. That's not a lot of weight to press them into the ground. And your electric energizer is sending out this pulse. It's looking for the shortest way to come back to the ground rod. Rabbits don't have a lot to ground them into the ground to create that circuit. They have fur on the paws of their feet. They don't have a wet muzzle. And when they're leaping through the fence, they're not on the ground at all, and they're out. So I finally had to admit that this was a problem. And I moved to, here's the answer to your question, a physical barrier fence. So electric fence is a psychological barrier. Waves them out, they don't want to touch it, they stay in. Physical barrier fence physically prevents them from leaving. This is slightly, well, I guess I should say, this physical barrier, when I was using electric fencing, I had a 23% escape loss. So rabbits would go out, and I would just never see them again. I thought I would find evidence of predation. I would find something. I never found anything. They were just out there. And I felt very uncomfortable that my rabbits might have been out there copulating with the wild population. We do not need more wild rabbits. So I felt very uncomfortable with this. And when I moved to the physical barrier fence, I went to a 0% escape loss, which I felt was very acceptable. And the way this works, this is a hog panel that I flipped upside down. The small gradations are at the top, large at the bottom, covered the large with the chicken wire. There's 2x2 braces. I should say I cut the hog panel in half, so they're 8 feet long. These 2x2 braces, one on either side, they hook with a little U into the cross piece on the hog panel. There's an electric wire on the outside only for predators. And this electric wire, there's one at the top and there's one at the bottom. The final thing, rabbits do dig. I want them to display their natural behavior. I want them to have fun with each other, which includes fighting. I want them to dig. I just don't want them to dig out. And so this is what the skirt is for. So you can see in this photograph here, the skirt is lining the bottom of the outside of the fence. It's essentially a miniature sand tube. So it's about this big around with sand in it. It's weighted to the ground. I kick it towards the fence, and it will effectively block the bright neon sign saying, dig here, you can get out. So this here, I'm using to show this sandbag actually lost some of the sand, so it's sitting up higher. Ideally, the skirt would be pressed against the ground and pushed up against the fence. And like I said, it's very effective. I have not ever lost a rabbit to the wobbly yonder. That wasn't my fault. So I designed that fence. The next element of my system that I designed was the houses, jokingly called cajachinas. When I was thinking about what do I want to build to protect them when they're out on pasture, I imagined what a warren would be like. So I felt like there'd be a dark, narrow tunnel, and then it would open up into this dark, cavernous area, and the rabbits would feel safe in there. I have 6 of them for the does and 1 of them for the bucks. So this house here, you can see there's a ramp in the back, there's a ramp in the front, and it has a wheel in the back, a post in the front, and this entire thing sits up off of the ground 10 inches so that rabbits can go underneath and feel safe and protected and hang out there. And it works quite well. Inside the house, the wire mesh bottom allows fecal matter and urine to pass through. Unfortunately, sometimes onto the head of somebody else. That's not my problem. It has 4 solid sides, a solid top, and there you can see the handle in the front where you can pick up and pull the house forward. Essentially, it's like a glorified garden cart. Can you guys see? Sorry. And you can see the rabbit sitting there on the top of the ramp. The ramp closes and opens. This is useful for many things. The first is when you want to move the house. You don't want the ramp dragging on the ground. So here's the ramp open. I have these little cleats on there so that the rabbits can grip and run inside. And here's the ramp closed. It's just a lever. You just flip it closed. I'll Also, if you need to isolate a doe for whatever reason, she can be in the house with the ramps closed and yet still socialize with the other rabbits through the floor. Inside the house also is where they should kindle. I have nesting boxes in there. The doe goes in, builds a nest. Those babies grow to a certain age, at which point they leap out of the nest, at which point I want them to have immediate nutrition, and so that's why there's a hay feeder in all of the houses. So the next element of the system that I designed is the handling system. So I have all of these rabbits. I have 57 does now and a whole bunch of fryers, about 130 now. So how do I know what is going on? Who kindled where? Who is doing what? With whom? At what time? So I'm trying to figure all this out, and I was inspired by the sheep handling system that we had at Stone Barns, where we had a chute, and the sheep would come in, and we were able to do IPM, or integrated pest management, for them. And we could do what we needed to do with an individual sheep and then let the sheep go. I wanted to do the same thing with the rabbits. I wanted to keep track of who's doing what. Each rabbit is identified in her left ear if she is full grown with a tattoo. The fryers are identified by a Sharpie marker. I write their mama's number in their ear, so I know genetic lines. But in order to do all of that, I have to get my hands on them, and I don't want to be chasing them around and underneath all these houses. So I built this ramp. Basically, there's a cavern with a solid side in the area where they are moving to, and there's this ladder type feature leading up to it. So rabbits cannot see directly in front of them. They are a prey animal. You can only see from the sides. So they need to feel with their paws and with their whiskers what's immediately in front of me. They step on a rung of the ladder, and then the next step is kind of like, well, I don't feel anything. I don't really know what's going on. So that prevents the rabbits from going up and over. However, it doesn't prevent the houses from going up and over. So I flush all of the rabbits out of the house. I close the ramps, and then I pull the houses over the ramps into the new area, and it keeps all of the rabbits in the old area, at which point I can take this wire, mesh, accordion type thing, link it to one side of the fence, and gently sweep all of them into a tight little clump where I can reach down and pick up each individual rabbit. I will say, to be quite candid, the rabbits do not like this. They don't like being that close together. And when they get stressed out, sometimes it stresses me out. So I say, let's do this as quickly as possible. If you guys behave, you get done sooner. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I sit here on my little bench. I have my scale, I have my bucket, I have all my rabbits. I pick them up, I look at the ear, I have my note card, I have my little writing table. I write down the information that I need to know. I reach over the fence, I put them on this little blue milk crate, and then they are rewarded by the whole lush pasture waiting for them. So they have to tolerate a little bit of uncomfortableness, and then they are rewarded by more food. So before I go out to the pasture, I have a number of things that I know I want to collect about each rabbit. So that's what this is. And I write these things on a piece of paper with pen, and so I know what I'm looking for. First is the doe individual number. Then what I have to do to that doe that day. That sounds bad, but that's what it is. So for example, this doe I have to palpate. I feel their abdomen. Are they pregnant? This one, last week I felt her up, and she was not pregnant, I didn't think, and we'll see if I'm right. I'm also looking at the kits, how many are there. So this is all information. In addition, there's sometimes random things. I keep all of my own replacement stock, so I'm tattooing these fryers that will then grow into does, and I know who their mother and their father are, and I've kept them for specific reasons, and I'm hoping that they'll perform for me in the way that I like. So this is all information that's on the sheet before I go out to the field. And while I'm in the field, I write down each individual doe's body condition. What does she feel like? This is super subjective. This is between a scale of 1 to 5. 3 is perfect, 5 is obese, 1's skinny, 0 is dead. visual cue, like, oh, she feels skinny or she feels, acceptably plump to breed or whatever. I'm also taking their actual weight. How much does she weigh from week to week? That gives me feedback for two things. What's the pasture like this week? Did they get enough to eat? Sorry. And are they happy with that food forage? And the second thing I'm collecting is if they are pregnant, they will usually gain about 10 to 12 ounces. So that gives me a very good indication that they will in fact kindle. You had a question, sir. So the question is, how often do I handle? The answer is yes, I handle every Wednesday. With a few exceptions, I take Christmas off. My goal is to handle 48 weeks a year. So there's 4 weeks in there that I built in that I can not handle. But if you don't handle for a week, those fryers that have a magic marker written in their ear of their mama, that can, if you have a big rainstorm, you'll lose that data. So it's good motivation for me to continually handle. Usually a week, a Sharpie marker in the ear is effective. 2 weeks, pushing it, 3 weeks, it's gone. I'm also commenting, what's happening with this doe? Is she okay? This one had a growth on the vulva. I wanted to keep my eye on it, so I commented that. It's just a way for me to keep track. Also, who am I breeding? These are my 4 bucks down here. Their body condition and their weight, and little spot, I bred to those 4 does. So that helps me keep track of the genetics. This field data, so between Wednesdays, I check on them once or twice, always twice a day. What I mean to say is I move them once and I check on them once. And I'm just writing notes about what happens. For example, this doe kindled here and had this many kids. The desk data, I put this all into a computer program called Rabbit Register. This is meant for show rabbits. I really only use 2 toggles in here. The first is the data about the individual rabbit, and the second is her litters. So here's all my individuals. Here's the day they were born. Here's their sex. This is what I look for individuals. Gives me the date of birth, their sex, the ear number, who the mom and dad is. And this is helpful. I have a little picture there. So when I go out to the field and I find a nest that's built with all black fur, I can tell who it might be if I have a picture. The litters, so this is one doe, and this is every time I exposed her and which buck I exposed, and then all of her litters, how many were born, how many died, how many lived, etc. All of that data I then look at, and I do pull data out and look at it in Excel. I'm keeping really close track of all of this. I don't expect people who are getting into this to keep this anal attention. I'm doing it for 2 reasons. The first is it's showing me that I'm making progress. So this is an experiment. I started it in 2008. I had no idea what was going to happen. I've developed all of these things over time because there were things that I wanted to see, and I wanted to see progress. Currently, I started and I had, an absurdly high mortality rate, upwards of 90%. Now my mortality rate is 67%, and I knew that. 67% is still wicked high. I want it to go lower. My target is 25%, which is what a traditional caged method allows for 25% mortality, kit mortality. So it allows me to keep track of information and see that I'm making progress, and it also allows me, if anybody else were to replicate it, such as you all, then we can talk over the phone and say, did you see this? What happens when this happens? You have a question? I do not have a top over my enclosure. Is that correct? That's the question. That's true, and I have no predation problems. You have a question? The question is, why am I seeing such a high kit mortality? It's not enteritis. I have virtually no enteritis. I have virtually no internal parasites. Both of those are solved by the repeated daily moving on the pasture and really good forage, or better forage than some alfalfa pellets that you can buy in the market. It's because The blunt answer is I have no idea. I mean, I have no idea what's going on in that rabbit's head. You know, why did she kindle there? Why didn't she kindle in the nesting box? Why did she abandon it? I don't know. I mean, it's a complete mystery. But I think some factors are that I'm asking the rabbits to do two things that people do not usually ask them to do. First, survive entirely on grass. Second, kindle in a colony that moves. So there's a lot of moving parts here. And I do have does that are successful, which is why I keep plugging on, because I think eventually, if I keep selecting, I will get what I want. So that brings up, I have all these babies that are dying, so how do they get to be babies? I do have a lot of babies that live. I'm kind of joking. But I do want to prepare you because rabbits do have a very high mortality rate. They are a prey animal. Do not be alarmed by that. Just like don't be alarmed by the red urine. Don't be alarmed that the fact that they eat their own fecal matter. They do have a lot of kid mortality. Which isn't to excuse it. I want to bring it down. So when I breed, this is what I jokingly call the playpen. And I put one buck with 3 does for 24 hours. I am changing this, actually. 3 weeks ago, I started with a new system, and we'll see how it goes. But this is what I used to do. I'm trying to increase the conception rate. So what I'm doing now is I'm actually splitting the playpen into 4 quadrants, and I have 4 bucks, one in each quadrant, and I have 4 does, one in each quadrant. So they get one-on-one individual attention. And I do think a side benefit of this new system, which we'll see as it plays out, the bucks, I have 4 mature bucks, I keep them all together. People say, you cannot keep bucks together. I say, oh, but I do. And so there's social dynamics happening here, and you need to be aware of them as a manager. So when I had 4 bucks, and I would take one away, and he would be breeding for 24 hours, and I would reintroduce him, and there was a lot of fighting, because these 3 got really used to this one being gone, and so they created a new pecking order, and then you reintroduce this, and they have to figure it all out again. So now when I take all 4 out, they're all doing their thing, put them all back together, and they're like, oh yeah, I remember you. So I'm hoping that it will decrease some of that re-entrance anxiety or fighting, I guess you would say. So this is the playpen. I just have this is the ramp from the handling, and it creates a little bit of shelter for the 24 hours that they're all together. Then the babies come along. 31.2 days later is my average gestation. It can be anywhere from 28 to 33 days. What do I ask of the mom? So I have 5 criteria that I'm evaluating the does. First, she has to accept service. This is rudimentary. Let's start at the beginning. She has to accept service. She has to let the buck mount and inseminate. Second, she has to conceive. Third, she has to kindle in a nesting box. Sometimes they kindle on the ground. Sometimes they dig a massive long hole and they kindle at the end of it, all of which causes more labor for me. If they just kindle in a nesting box, they know where they are, they follow them. She has to kindle at least 5 kits. She has to bring those 5 kits to weaning age, which I count as 3 weeks. 3 weeks is when the kits start hopping on a nesting box and eating solid food. Between 3 and 5 weeks, they're doing a combination solid food and nursing. Pretty much after 5 weeks, they're on solid food. Based on this criteria, I select does that will replace stock from those does. So we'll see if these traits are genetically transferable. Moving on to slaughter. I've had a number of questions about slaughter. Rabbits used to be regulated under Statute 97. It's the same statute. It's changed completely. Old rules. You could slaughter on farm. You could sell on farm. No limit. People could buy. If you wanted to sell to any wholesale outlet, you had to slaughter and have them processed at any place that had a food processor's license. Couldn't cross state lines. New rules. You always have to have them slaughtered at a state or federally inspected slaughterhouse. You can only sell from your farm if you have a retail license. If you ever make rabbit sausage, even at a state or federally inspected facility with nitrates or nitrites, it can never cross state lines. I don't get it. And the final one is to go to a wholesale outlet. Well, that's basically the thing. You always have to have them at a state or federally inspected slaughter facility. And there's not many. I don't know of any federally inspected slaughter facilities in Wisconsin that would accept rabbits. Not to mention that there's not really a protocol for inspection, and there's a lot of things that are unknown. This just happened. I learned about it on February 15th. This took place in January. The comment period that I did not know about was January 13th. It has passed the House and the Assembly. Has not been signed by the governor. I do not know what will happen, but it's a big change. Yes. This is Wisconsin rules. Oh yeah, all of you lovely people that live in other states you can ignore. I don't know what your state is. New York, when I lived there, was very friendly to the small producer. I could slaughter and sell 5,000, under 5,000, because it was classified as a poultry unit. Yeah. Question? Yeah, rabbit shares. Can you have rabbit shares? Well, sure. Right? I'm sorry, I forgot to repeat your question. Are other states' regulations the same? And I have no idea. You'll need to look into it. But this is basically the email that Mark Lehman sent out that was forwarded to me that made me aware of these new rules. And on that sign-up sheet, if it's still passing around, I don't know where that ended up. If you want to keep abreast of what happens, please put your name on there, and I'll put you on an email listserv. So I do slaughter myself. I slaughter all my own rabbits. It's not hard. If you want to learn more information, I can talk to you about it. I use blunt force trauma, which is a blow to the back of the head, and then cutting the arteries. It's approved by the American Veterinary Medical Association as a humane way of dispatching rabbits. This is my transport. So this is why I like to slaughter my own rabbits, is because I go out to the field and I put them in the cage, and then I put a sheet over the cage, and then I bring them back to the barn, and they're in the cage for, a 10-minute transport, and then I'm soldering, and it takes me about 4 hours. And so it's just easy. Whereas if I go to a slaughterhouse, I have to be there before 7 a.m. So the last thing is slaughtered after 4 p.m. I have to make 2 trips. I would much rather do it myself, not only for economic reasons, also for personal reasons. I really like the fact that nearly every rabbit that is born into my herd leaves the herd at my hands. I have a lot of control. I have a lot of standards that I want to make sure that I meet. And I think I have a really quality product, and I want to make sure that it's handled properly. So what about winter? I built a yurt for the rabbits to live in. This is outside, so they have an outdoor yard here, and inside the yurt, they can run in and out at their own choice, because the yurt wall is rolled up a little bit here, and they can run through that lattice to go to the outside yard or run inside. Inside, I bed down with straw. I do not bed down outside. I have 2 hay feeders here. They're all crowded around a cedar branch there. So internal parasites in the winter can be a little bit of a problem, so I try to be proactive by feeding cedar, putting apple cider vinegar in their water, and bedding them down every single morning with straw. So it's a deep bed pack that builds up over time. I used to feed a sprouted mung bean mix simply because I had access to it. I don't feed that anymore. I don't supplement in the winter. All I feed in the winter is hay and vegetable scraps. I do have a water bowl with a bird bath de-icer. Works really well for small quantities of water for the rabbits. And it's only about $8 a month in electricity to run the bird bath de-icer. So pretty good. Question? What about Fodder Pro to grow your own grass? That works. I've grown wheatgrass for them. They love it. I do put vinegar in their water. However, in the winter, I will say they drink very little water. I don't think they're actually ingesting enough to make a marked difference. It's more to make me feel better. those from my herd, and their livers are beautiful. So there's 14 strains of coccidiosis that can affect rabbits, and a lot of them harbor themselves in the liver. So my livers look beautiful. Rabbits, the liver ratio is the largest to the meat ratio of any mammal, so they have a really big liver. And in my opinion, it's the best liver ever. It is so good. So I really like the fact, I seriously tell my customers, if you do not want the internal organs, give them back to me. And they do. So this is the outside of the yard. As you can see, when the snow gets really tall, you gotta shovel out that fence, and they just go up and over and out. And they will play. So they do like to tunnel in the snow, which I think is pretty cool. So here's a little, oh, I'm sorry, question. How much water do they go through summer versus winter? Virtually none ever. Yeah, I mean, in the summer, especially late summer, so August, September, October, November, I usually get them off pasture early December. Especially October, November, I'm really starting to feed a lot of hay inside the houses to make the transition from pasture to winter housing. Then they will go through, at maximum, about 3 gallons in a 24-hour period. That's about the most they ever drink. Spring flush, hardly touch it. Even now, I mean, I have a 1.5 gallon water bowl in there, and they just don't drink a lot. If I don't feed vegetable scraps, water intake drastically increases if they're only on hay. So you just have to pay attention. So here's a question. Describe the hay quality that I look for. I really like baleage. Rabbits really like it too. Highly recommend that. I've fed everything from first cut to third cut. Currently I'm feeding a third cut from our own property. Really what I'm looking at is the feedback that I'm getting from the weekly weighs. So are they losing weight? Do they feel skinny? If they do, then I move to a higher quality feed. I try to save the highest quality feeds for March and April before they head out to the pasture. But I've never had my hay analyzed. So as far as the actual numbers go, I don't really know what they're getting. I'm just going by the feedback that I get from them. Growth rate does drastically reduce in the winter. Yes. How many rabbits do I overwinter? Right now, I breed on a rolling basis. So every week that I handle, I expose 3 or 4 does to a buck. Rabbits are daylight sensitive, so in the winter conception drops off. That creates a lag time. So between March and July is actually my lowest numbers, because all those that conceived in the fall, then I carry over the winter. So right now I have 137, and that's typical. I think my goal is to have 40 reliable breeding does and their offspring, which is a carrying capacity of about 250 rabbits at one time. Sorry? Yeah, the yurt will hold 250 rabbits because it has the outside yard. The yurt is a 20-foot diameter. Yes, question. What is my hay? It is an alfalfa grass mix currently. But I feel like I've fed nearly everything. Question? What about legumes? So I have sprouted a number of legumes, lentils, 4 kinds of lentils, mung beans. I mean, they love them all. You can feed them sunflower seeds. They love those. Those are all very expensive, time-consuming feedstuffs, and they do fine without it, so I dropped it. If you want to do that, they would love you. So here's a little bit of a reality check. Well, here's my goals. I want to produce 15 rabbits per week for slaughter. I want to slaughter 48 weeks per year. So every week that I handle, I'm also slaughtering, because I go out there and I pick all of them up so I can then pull the ones that I want to slaughter. So ideally, I want to produce 720 fryers per year. My average carcass weight is 2.6 pounds. I charge $9 a pound for a fryer, $6 a pound for a stewer. So that's an average of $23.40 per rabbit. I put up here after a 3-year stabilization because I'm not there yet. And then when I was really looking at it, I thought, it's probably going to take me 7 years to get there. So maybe it'll take 2. I don't know. Who knows? But that's my goal. And it's really optimistic. But if you're going to have a goal, it might as well be lofty, right? Here's where I am in reality. Last year, I slaughtered 137 rabbits. I sold 114. That's a gross income of $2,685. That, however, is a 300% increase over 2014. So I'm moving in the right direction. Prior to this, I didn't have stable land. I was always farming full-time for somebody else. I didn't have a lot of time to put into the rabbits. Now I am making this the focus, and these are my goals, and I hope to get there. The point of this is to say that there are many ways to be compensated. Currently, the rabbits are not financially viable. I still find them an incredibly rewarding experience and experiment. Question. So what's the difference between my gross and my net? Currently, it's the same because I don't have any slaughter processing fees. I didn't include labor. So basically all of that money went straight into my pocket because I do all direct sales. So why do this, right? Like, why would you put rabbits on pasture if it's not entirely working the way I want it to, and it's not producing entirely the way I want it to? So, why would you do this? Well, you get adorable pictures like this, and you have a wonderful experience. But, there's a lot of other reasons. The first is that the meat is really good, as this gentleman can attest. It is healthy. Rabbit is healthy generally. And then you put it out on pasture. And there's all sorts of documents and literature. I have some of them up here. Less saturated fat, more omega-3 fatty acids in grass-fed meat. More vitamins and disease-fighting antioxidants. There's tons of literature out there saying that having your animals in a grass-based system is good for them, and it's good for you. And I think the same is true for rabbits. So it's tasty, healthy meat, and those benefits are increased because they're on pasture and have a niche market. And also, it's good food for me, and there's good food for the rabbit. It's good for the land. Like I said, it's good for the rabbits, but mostly it's rewarding for me. I love this picture because here's this lady standing in the courtyard, and she's just having a moment with her rabbit. And I feel like I go out to the pasture to work with the rabbits, and it's almost a meditative practice. It's every day. It's an hour. I know what I'm doing. I'm looking at the rabbits. They're giving me feedback. And so it's this give and take. And I feel very, very blessed to be able to have this experience because I had no idea what I was getting into. And then all of these things opened up before me, and I find it incredibly fulfilling. And I think it is the best way to raise rabbits. When I have them in cages, not nearly as satisfactory. I received a SARE grant in 2010. This is the video. If you just look up or Google that little phrase down there, it'll pop up. It's only 8 minutes. Then you can see the rabbits in action, which will really capture your heart. Question? Traditional rabbit. Traditional rabbit has been tested and in profile with other meats. It skyrockets off the chart. Very low in cholesterol, very low in sodium, very high in protein, very heart-healthy meat. I can get you more details. That's what I know offhand. Question. Italian type style, that with a better pasture, with higher quality forage that's more densely packed, that my footprint won't actually expand that much, and so my labor won't expand that much either. I'm hoping about a 20 to 25% increase, which would bring me to about 30 some hours a week, which if I'm making 16,000 a year is acceptable to me. It's like a part-time job. So I do not know if that will be true. That's what I hope. Question? Am I selling to restaurants? The answer is yes. What breeds do I prefer? I have a triple cross. It's a California New Zealand Dutch, or so I've been told. I've never seen any evidence of the Dutch. I don't have a strong breed preference. I've tried 4 different heritage breeds over the past 10 years, none of which actually worked the way that I wanted them to. I was very interested in the types of heritage, or the heritage breeds in general, and it just didn't work. I think there probably is a difference, especially in taste between breeds. I mean, I've heard that the Rex rabbit is a very moist meat. The silver fox rabbit won the slow food arc of taste. I've never done a taste comparison between my rabbits and their rabbits, but eventually I think it would be an interesting experiment to have my system used side by side with my breed and another breed and to see what happens. Anybody want to give me money for that? But yeah, right now I don't advocate for a particular breed. Question? Is there a difference in meat quality seasonally because I slaughter year-round? I think so. I don't know so. The biggest differences that I see is that there is, in the winter, more pinworms. So pinworms, according to the Veterinary Medical Association, are no problem. Don't worry about them. But in the winter, I get concerned because there's a lot of pinworms in their intestines. Like I said, the vets don't worry about them. They're like, oh, whatever, pinworms. But I do think that there's a carrying capacity at which it's not going to be good for the rabbits.